You know exactly what you need to do, but something invisible keeps blocking your path forward. Day after day, you watch as opportunities slip through your fingers while others seem to effortlessly climb the ladder of success. You've read the books, watched the videos, set the goals, yet that breakthrough remains frustratingly out of reach. What you don't realize is that it's not lack of information holding you back. It's something far more fundamental, a set of invisible mental barriers that Napoleon Hill identified nearly a century ago. Barriers that continue to silently sabotage millions of potential success stories today. In the next few minutes, I'm going to reveal the 3 sacred rules that Hill discovered through his 20 years studying the world's most successful individuals. Rules that have the power to transform your life from constant struggle to unstoppable momentum. This isn't just another motivational piece. It's a blueprint for rewiring the very foundation of how you approach success. Especially on those days when everything seems to be working against you. The first place you lose is in your mind. Before any external defeat, there is always an internal surrender. When Napoleon Hill gained unprecedented access to study Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, Andrew Carnegie, and 500 plus of the world's most successful individuals, he discovered something remarkable. The primary battlefield where success or failure is determined isn't in the marketplace, the boardroom, or even in your daily habits. It's in the 6 inches between your ears, your mind. What you'll discover today isn't just another think positive lecture. It's about understanding the precise mental mechanisms that either propel extraordinary prepayment or guarantee perpetual mediocrity. The most dangerous prison is the one with invisible walls. And most people live their entire lives trapped within mental constructs they never even realize exist. Every morning, you wake up to an invisible force as powerful as gravity itself. The accumulated mental patterns that automatically dictate how you see yourself, your capabilities, and what's possible for your life. This mental gravity doesn't announce itself. It operates silently in the background, creating what Hill called your mental attitude. When you try to push toward success but constantly feel pulled back to the same results, it's not external circumstances defeating you. It's this mental gravity. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Hill's famous words aren't just a cute saying for Instagram captions. They represent his fundamental discovery about the operating system of human achievement. Let me ask you something. How many times have you started strong toward a goal, only to find yourself back at square one weeks later? The excitement fades, the motivation disappears, the doubts creep in, and before long, you're exactly where you started, or worse. This isn't a character flaw. It's the predictable result of trying to create external change without first addressing the mental program. Running beneath the surface. Napoleon Hill called it auto-suggestion, the principle that your conscious mind can reprogram your subconscious through directed, emotionalized thought. Most people's thoughts flow randomly like water, taking the path of least resistance. One negative news story, one dismissive comment from a colleague, one disappointment, and their mental state shifts immediately to align with these inputs. The first sacred rule is this: you must direct your thoughts with the same intentionality an archer directs an arrow. Hill discovered that the most successful people weren't necessarily the most talented or educated. They were the ones who maintained complete sovereignty over their mental domain. They practiced what Hill called directed auto-suggestion, the deliberate programming of the subconscious mind through conscious repetition of specific thoughts and beliefs. Here's how you implement this rule starting today. Create a written statement of exactly what you intend to achieve and by when. This isn't a wish or a hope. It's a declaration of what will be. Read this statement aloud twice daily upon waking and before sleeping with full emotional intensity as if it were already accomplished. End each reading with the phrase, "My mind is permanently fixed upon the attainment of this goal. I will let nothing interfere with my success." This practice seems deceptively simple. That's precisely why most dismiss it without ever experiencing its transformative power. The subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between what's vividly imagined and what's actually experienced. Through consistent repetition, you literally rewire your mental operating system. Edison failed 10,000 times before creating the light bulb. When asked about these failures, he famously responded, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." This wasn't just positive thinking, it was the practical application of directed autosuggestion. Edison programmed his mind to interpret every setback as a stepping stone rather than a stopping point. Ask yourself, honestly, how much time have you invested in intentionally programming your subconscious mind? If you're like most, the answer is next to none. Instead, you've allowed random external stimuli and past experiences to write the code that now determines your automatic responses to challenge and opportunity. Today, right now, you stand at a crossroads. Will you continue surrendering your mental domain to whoever or whatever happens to influence it? Or will you take complete ownership of the most powerful force in your universe, your own mind? The choice you make in this moment will ripple through every dimension of your life for years to come. Choose wisely. The subconscious mind draws its energy from the emotions, Hill wrote after years of research. This is why casual wishes fail, while emotionalized desires, backed by persistent thought, succeed. Most approach their goals with intellectual interest, but not emotional intensity. They say they want success, but their emotional energy is invested in comfort, security, and avoiding failure. Their words say achievement, while their emotions scream safety. In this battle, emotions always win. Think of the last time you felt absolutely certain about something. Not just intellectually convinced, but bone-deep certain. That certainty didn't come from logical analysis. It came from emotional conviction. Hill discovered that every single one of the 500 successful people he studied shared this trait. They felt more emotionally attached to their vision of success than to their fear of failure. Their dominant emotional state wasn't occasional motivation but unwavering faith. This level of emotional conviction isn't natural for most. It must be deliberately cultivated through the daily practice of directed autosuggestion. Each repetition of your goal with genuine emotional intensity creates new neural pathways that eventually become your default operating system. The question you must ask yourself isn't, "Do I want success?" Of course you do. The real question is, am I willing to reorganize my mental and emotional energy to make success inevitable? When you look at your life honestly, where is your emotional energy actually invested? In worrying about bills, rehashing past failures, comparing yourself to others, seeking comfort and distraction? What would happen if you channeled that same emotional intensity into the achievement of your most important goal? Even for just 10 minutes each morning and evening. Success isn't complicated, it's the consistent application of simple principles that most are unwilling to practice with discipline. Today, make the decision that your mental domain will no longer be left to chance or circumstance. Take full command of what you think about, what you focus on, and what you emotionally energize. This alone will set you apart from 95% of the population. What invisible thoughts are currently shaping your destiny? And more importantly, are you ready to take control of them once and for all? What you persistently think about, you ultimately attract into your life. Not through mystical forces, but through recognizable mechanisms of human psychology and behavior. Napoleon Hill's second sacred rule builds directly upon the first. Once you've taken command of your mental domain through directed autosuggestion, you must activate what he called success magnetism, the ability to attract the people, opportunities, and resources necessary for achievement. Many misunderstand this principle as some kind of magical thinking. It's anything but. Hill documented specific psychological and behavioral patterns that explain precisely how dominant thoughts translate into tangible results. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. This famous quote, often attributed to Jim Ronico's Hill's discovery nearly 50 years earlier. Hill called it the mastermind principle, the idea that your success is directly influenced by the mental attitudes of those with whom you habitually associate. Look around at the 5 people you interact with most frequently. Their average income is likely within 20% of your own. Their health habits, relationship patterns, and overall outlook on life probably closely mirror yours. This isn't coincidence, this is the mastermind principle in action. The second sacred rule is this: you must deliberately cultivate relationships with those who embody the success you seek. Hill found that no great achievement was ever the product of a single mind working in isolation. Behind every Thomas Edison or Henry Ford was a carefully assembled group of like-minded individuals whose combined mental energy created an accelerated path to success. When you change your dominant thoughts through directed autosuggestion, something remarkable happens. You naturally begin to attract and be attracted to people who share similar mental frequencies. Your conversations change. Your interests shift. Your behavior aligns with your new dominant thoughts. Andrew Carnegie, once the richest man in the world and Hill's primary mentor, attributed his success not to his own brilliance but to his ability to attract and organize the right people around shared objectives. "I know nothing about the manufacture of steel," Carnegie admitted. "I have experts around me who know all about it." Most people passively accept whatever relationships happen to be convenient or comfortable. They work alongside whoever happens to be employed at the same company. They socialize with whoever happens to live nearby. They maintain relationships out of habit rather than strategic intention. The successful minority, by contrast, are incredibly selective about their associations. They understand that every relationship either elevates their thinking or diminishes it. There is no neutral exchange of energy. Ask yourself, are the people closest to you elevating your thinking toward success or reinforcing limiting beliefs? Do they challenge you to grow or comfort you in mediocrity? These aren't easy questions to confront, but your willingness to answer them honestly may be the difference between breakthrough and breakdown in the coming year. General knowledge, no matter how great in quantity or variety it may be, is of but little use in the accumulation of money, Hill wrote in Think and Grow Rich. This observation led to another aspect of the second sacred rule. Success magnetism requires specialized knowledge applied with persistent action. In today's information age, general knowledge is abundant and therefore has limited value. Anyone can Google basic facts or concepts. What remains scarce and, therefore, valuable is specialized knowledge combined with the ability to take consistent, directed action. Hill studied hundreds of wealthy individuals and found that very few had extensive formal education. What they possessed instead was specific knowledge in their chosen field and the persistence to apply that knowledge until they succeeded. Consider Henry Ford, who had minimal formal education but possessed deep specialized knowledge about automobile manufacturing. When questioned about his lack of general knowledge during a libel case, Ford famously responded, "If I should need information on any subject, I know where to find it when I need it." The magnetism of success activates when you identify the specific knowledge most relevant to your goals. Learn that knowledge through both study and practical application. Persist in applying that knowledge even through repeated failures. Most people dabble. They learn just enough about many things to talk intelligently, but not enough about any one thing to produce extraordinary results. They start courses, but don't finish them. They read books, but don't implement the knowledge. They constantly seek new information rather than applying what they already know. Successful people, by contrast, dive deep. They become among the best in the world at their specific craft, whether it's marketing, coding, sales, leadership, or creative work. They understand that mastery in one area is exponentially more valuable than mediocrity in many. What specialized knowledge would most directly contribute to your success right now? And what daily actions would develop that knowledge from intellectual understanding to embodied mastery? The answers to these questions hold the key to activating your own success magnetism. Opportunity often comes disguised in the form of misfortune or temporary defeat. This Hill observation highlights another dimension of the second sacred rule. Success magnetism requires seeing opportunity where others see only obstacles. When the Great Depression devastated the American economy, most saw only disaster. A small minority, however, saw unprecedented opportunity. More millionaires were created during those challenging years than during many prosperous periods before. Why? Because scarcity reveals what abundance conceals. When resources are limited, inefficiencies become obvious. When systems break down, their flaws become visible. When people are desperate for solutions, they're willing to try new approaches. Thomas Edison lost his factory to fire when he was 67 years old. As he watched his life's work burn to the ground, he reportedly told his son, "Go get your mother and all her friends. They'll never see a fire like this again." The next morning, he declared, "I'm 67, but I'm not too old to make a fresh start," and began rebuilding what would become an even more successful enterprise. This isn't toxic positivity or naive optimism. It's the practical recognition that adversity creates opportunity for those prepared to see it and act upon it. Most wait for perfect conditions before taking action. They say, "I'll start when the economy improves," or "I'll launch when I have more experience," or "I'll invest when I have more capital." This waiting game ensures they never begin. The magnetism of success activates when you develop the mental habit of asking, "Where is the opportunity in this challenge? What advantage does this difficulty create that wouldn't exist in easier times?" Charles Darrow invented the game Monopoly during the Great Depression when he, like millions of others, was unemployed. Unable to afford vacations, people sought affordable entertainment at home. Darrow recognized this shift and created a game that allowed players to vicariously experience wealth and property ownership during a time when both seemed out of reach for most. Parker Brothers initially rejected the game, but Darrow persisted. Monopoly went on to become one of the best-selling board games of all time, making Darrow the world's first millionaire game designer. What challenge are you currently facing that, viewed differently, might contain the seed of extraordinary opportunity? What temporary defeat might be preparing you for unprecedented success? The answers lie not in external circumstances but in your perception of them. Perception you have the power to change through the first sacred rule of directed autosuggestion. Are you ready to activate the full power of success magnetism in your life? Or will you continue waiting for conditions to improve before taking decisive action? The decision is yours alone. Choose now. Indecision is the thief of opportunity. These words from Napoleon Hill capture the essence of the third sacred rule that separates the extraordinarily successful from the perpetually struggling. After studying hundreds of high achievers, Hill made a surprising discovery. It wasn't talent, education, connections, or even luck that ultimately determines success. It was the ability to make clear decisions and take committed action without the safety net of retreat. The word decision comes from Latin roots, meaning to cut off. A true decision doesn't preserve options, it eliminates them. It burns the bridges back to previous choices, forcing committed movement in the chosen direction. Most people never make real decisions. They make tentative commitments that preserve escape routes. They say, "I'll try this business idea and see how it goes," or "I'll give this relationship my best shot," or "I'll work toward this goal, as long as it's not too difficult." This wishy-washy approach guarantees mediocre results. Without the pressure of commitment, human nature gravitates toward comfort over growth, safety over achievement, the known over the unknown. The third sacred rule is this: you must make definite decisions and burn the bridges of retreat behind you. This principle showed up repeatedly in Hill's research. When Henry Ford decided to create the V8 engine, his engineers insisted it was impossible to cast an 8-cylinder engine block in one piece. Ford simply responded, "Produce it anyway." He didn't give them the option of failure. By eliminating the possibility of retreat, he forced creative solutions that eventually achieved what was thought impossible. Similarly, when Hernan Cortes arrived in Mexico in 1519, he ordered his men to burn the ships that had brought them from Spain. With retreat impossible, conquest became the only option. This extreme commitment led to one of history's most remarkable military victories. Most never experience extraordinary success precisely because they never make this level of committed decision. They keep one foot in the old world while tentatively testing the new one. When inevitable challenges arise, they retreat to safety rather than pushing through to break through. Ask yourself honestly, what decisions have you been postponing? What commitments have you been unwilling to make? What ships are you keeping in the harbor just in case your current venture becomes too difficult? The magnitude of your success will never exceed the magnitude of your decisions. Tentative commitments produce tentative results. Total commitment unlocks forces that remain dormant under any lesser condition. Effort only fully releases its reward after a person refuses to quit. This Hill observation reveals another dimension of the third sacred rule. Committed action must be sustained through what he called the persistence period, the time between initiating action and seeing tangible results. Hill discovered a predictable pattern in all achievement. After making a decision and taking initial action, every person encounters a period where effort appears to yield no results. During this persistence period, most people give up, concluding their approach isn't working. The few who continue eventually break through to success that appears sudden to outside observers but was actually the culmination of persistent effort through the invisible resistance barrier. R.H. Macy failed in 7 different businesses before his department store succeeded. Cole Sanders was rejected 1,009 times before finding a buyer for his chicken recipe. Walt Disney was fired from a newspaper for lacking imagination and went bankrupt several times before creating his entertainment empire. What separated these individuals from countless others with similar talents and ideas was simply their refusal to quit during the persistence period. The average person makes the fatal mistake of expecting immediate results from their actions. When these aren't forthcoming, They conclude their approach is flawed, rather than recognizing they're simply in the persistence period that precedes all achievement. Think about the last goal you abandoned. How close were you to breakthrough when you gave up? What might have happened had you persisted just a little longer? This isn't about blind stubbornness. Hill was clear that persistence must be coupled with adaptability, the willingness to modify approaches while maintaining commitment to the end goal. It's about maintaining unwavering faith in your desired outcome while remaining flexible about the path to achieve it. The key question isn't whether your current approach is working. It's whether you've made a real decision that eliminates the possibility of retreat. Without this level of commitment, you'll inevitably abandon ship when the waters get rough. Today, right now, you must ask yourself, what goal am I willing to pursue with such commitment that retreat becomes impossible? What bridges am I willing to burn to ensure my own success? The answer will determine whether you join the small minority who achieve extraordinary results or remain among the vast majority who live lives of quiet resignation to mediocrity. Faith is the head chemist of the mind. With these words, Hill identified the catalyst that transforms decisions into unstoppable action. By faith, Hill didn't mean blind belief or religious devotion. He meant absolute confidence in one's ability to achieve a desired outcome, regardless of temporary setbacks or apparent failures. This faith isn't wishful thinking. It's a psychological state cultivated through the previous sacred rules of directed autosuggestion and success magnetism. When Thomas Edison was asked if he felt discouraged after thousands of failed attempts to create a working light bulb, he replied, "Why would I feel discouraged? I now know thousands of ways that won't work." This response reveals the faith formula in action. The unwavering belief that success is inevitable for those who persist through failure. Most people operate from what psychologists now call a fixed mindset, the belief that abilities and outcomes are largely predetermined by talent or circumstances. The successful minority operate from what Hill called the faith formula, and what modern psychology terms a growth mindset. The belief that persistent effort can overcome any obstacle. The faith formula has three components: definite purpose, a clear, specific goal with a deadline, definite plan, a concrete series of actions toward that goal, definite alliance, a group of like-minded individuals who support your success. When these three elements combine, they create a psychological state that makes retreat unthinkable, even in the face of repeated setbacks. This isn't about positive thinking. It's about creating conditions where positive action becomes the only option. Consider the Wright brothers. With minimal formal education and limited financial resources, they competed against better-funded, better-educated teams in the race to achieve powered flight. What separated them was their application of the faith formula. They had a definite purpose-controlled, powered flight, a definite plan, methodical testing and iteration, and a definite alliance each other, plus a small team of dedicated supporters. Their unwavering commitment eventually achieved what many considered impossible. The faith formula isn't about believing success will magically appear. It's about creating psychological conditions where you'll take consistent action until success becomes inevitable. Ask yourself, do I have a definite purpose with a deadline? Do I have a definite plan of action? Do I have a definite alliance of supportive individuals? If you're missing any of these elements, your commitment will falter when challenges arise. Today, make the decision to complete your faith formula. Define your purpose with clarity and conviction. Create a step-by-step plan of action. And most importantly, cultivate relationships with those who believe in your success as much as they believe in their own. What will you commit to with such conviction that retreat becomes unthinkable? Your answer will determine everything about your future. Lukewarm desires produce lukewarm results. The extraordinary life demands extraordinary commitment, fueled by what Napoleon Hill called a burning desire. Throughout his decades of research, Hill observed that successful people weren't just mildly interested in their goals, they were obsessed. They thought about their objectives constantly. They talked about them frequently. They organized their entire lives around achievement of their primary purpose. This level of desire often appears irrational to outside observers. When Howard Schultz mortgaged his house to keep his coffee shop concept alive, financial analysts thought he was crazy. When Elon Musk invested his last dollars into SpaceX and Tesla simultaneously, conventional wisdom deemed it foolhardy. When J.K. Rowling continued writing while on welfare as a single mother, practical minds suggested she focus on more reliable employment. Yet this irrational level of desire is precisely what separates extraordinary achievement from ordinary effort. The fourth dimension of Hill's success principles centers on a critical question: how badly do you want it? Most people want better lives, more income, improved relationships, and greater impact. But wanting alone produces nothing. Hill discovered that achievement begins only when wanting transforms into an all-consuming desire that makes failure unacceptable. Clement Stone, a businessman who built a fortune using Hill's principles, often asked aspiring entrepreneurs, "How badly do you want to succeed?" Badly enough to get up 2 hours earlier each morning, badly enough to work while others socialize, badly enough to persist when everyone says you're wasting your time. These questions reveal the gap between casual interest and burning desire. Casual interest yields to convenience. Burning desire overcomes all obstacles. Consider Olympic athletes who trained 6 to 8 hours daily for years to compete for a few minutes, or entrepreneurs who work 80-hour weeks for a decade to build something significant, or artists who practice their craft daily for a lifetime to achieve mastery. From the outside, such commitment appears extreme. From the inside, it feels like the only option when fueled by burning desire. Ask yourself honestly, do I have mild interest in my goals or genuine burning desire? Would I continue pursuing them if everyone in my life discouraged me? Would I persist if I failed publicly multiple times? Would I sacrifice comfort, leisure, and immediate pleasure for long-term achievement? Your answers reveal whether you're operating from the level of wish, want, or burning desire. Only the latter has the power to overcome the inevitable obstacles on the path to extraordinary achievement. Sex transmutation is the switching of the mind from thoughts of physical expression to thoughts of some other nature. With these words, Hill introduced one of his most powerful yet misunderstood concepts, the idea that sexual energy can be channeled into creative achievement. By this, Hill didn't mean celibacy or denial of sexual expression. Rather, he observed that the most successful individuals he studied had learned to harness their natural creative energy and direct it toward their primary goals, rather than dissipating it through undisciplined thought and action. This principle extends beyond sexuality to all forms of emotional and physical energy. The key insight is that human energy is neither created nor destroyed, it is merely channeled. Those who achieve extraordinary results have learned to channel their full energy toward their definite purpose, rather than scattering it across numerous distractions and indulgences. Most people dissipate their creative energy through endless social media consumption. Mindless entertainment, purposeless conversations, scattered focus across too many projects. worry about circumstances beyond their control, reliving past failures or disappointments. The successful minority guard their energy zealously and direct it specifically toward their primary objectives. This doesn't mean they never relax or enjoy leisure. It means they're strategic about where their mental, emotional, and physical energy flows. Thomas Edison worked 18 to 20-hour days when engaged in creative projects. When asked about his incredible productivity, he famously said, "I never did a day's work in my life. It was all fun." This statement reveals the secret of energy transmutation. When you're driven by burning desire, work becomes energizing rather than depleting. Ask yourself, where is my creative energy currently flowing? Am I channeling it deliberately toward my most important goals? Or is it leaking away through undisciplined habits and attention? Your answer reveals whether you're practicing energy transmutation or energy dissipation. The former leads to achievement, the latter to frustration. The starting point of all achievement is desire. Keep this constantly in mind. Weak desires bring weak results, just as a small fire makes a small amount of heat. This Hill observation highlights an uncomfortable truth. Success requires healthy obsession. The word obsession has negative connotations in modern culture. Yet every extraordinary achiever Hill studied displayed obsessive focus on their primary objectives. They thought about their goals constantly. They organized their entire lives around achievement. They evaluated every opportunity, relationship, and activity based on whether it moved them closer to or further from their desired outcomes. This level of focus appears unhealthy to those operating from conventional mindsets. But it's precisely this unconventional thinking that produces unconventional results. Consider Steve Jobs, who was notorious for his obsessive focus on product details others deemed insignificant. Or Michael Jordan, whose competitive obsession extended to casual card games with teammates. Or Marie Curie, who was so absorbed in her research that she often forgot to eat. These aren't examples of work-life imbalance. They're demonstrations of the obsession test that Hill identified as essential to extraordinary achievement. Ask yourself, what am I genuinely obsessed with? What do I think about when I wake up and before I sleep? What would I happily discuss for hours without tiring? What would I continue pursuing even if I weren't paid for it? Your answers reveal your true priorities rather than your stated ones. If your goals don't spark obsessive interest, either they're not aligned with your authentic desires or you haven't yet developed the level of commitment necessary for extraordinary achievement. Today, examine your relationship with desire. Have you settled for mild interest when burning obsession is required? Are you channeling your creative energy deliberately or allowing it to dissipate through undisciplined attention? Are you pursuing goals worthy of obsession or merely acceptable objectives that don't ignite your full potential? The quality of your desire determines the quality of your results. Lukewarm commitment yields lukewarm outcomes. Burning desire unleashes forces that transform the seemingly impossible into the inevitable. What will you choose? The majority of men meet with failure because of their lack of persistence in creating new plans to take the place of those which fail. This observation from Napoleon Hill reveals the invisible enemy that prevents most people from achieving their potential: unconscious self-sabotage. After interviewing hundreds of both successful and unsuccessful individuals, Hill identified a startling pattern. Those who achieved extraordinary results weren't necessarily more talented, educated, or even harder working than those who failed. They simply possessed a greater awareness of and stronger defenses against mechanisms of self-sabotage that derail most people's efforts. Your brain has one primary directive, hardwired through millions of years of evolution: seek pleasure, avoid pain, conserve energy. This biological programming served our ancestors well in environments of scarcity and danger. In modern life, however, it manifests as resistance to any change that requires short-term discomfort for long-term gain. Hill called this the conspiracy of the comfort zone, the unconscious tendency to sabotage any effort that threatens established patterns, regardless of whether those patterns serve your stated goals. When you attempt something new, set an ambitious goal, or commit to significant change, your brain automatically generates resistance in the form of procrastination. I'll start tomorrow when conditions are better. Rationalization, this approach probably wouldn't work anyway. Distraction, let me just check email, social media, before I begin. Doubt, who am I to think I could achieve something so significant? Fatigue, I'm too tired to give this my best effort right now. These responses aren't character flaws or signs of weakness. They're predictable, biological and psychological reactions to perceived threats to homeostasis. The comfort zone will always conspire to maintain the status quo, even when the status quo produces results you consciously despise. Most people misinterpret these responses as evidence they should abandon their goals. The successful minority recognize them as normal resistance that must be anticipated and overcome. Thomas Edison faced ridicule from the scientific community, repeated failures, and financial setbacks in his quest to develop a practical electric light. Instead of interpreting these challenges as signals to quit, he recognized them as inevitable obstacles on the path to breakthrough. Many of life's failures are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up, he observed. Ask yourself honestly, how often have you abandoned important goals at the first sign of discomfort, distraction, or doubt? How many times have you allowed the comfort zone conspiracy to override your conscious intentions? Your answer reveals whether you're operating from awareness of self-sabotage mechanisms or remaining vulnerable to their unconscious influence. The 5 enemies of success. Through his research, Hill identified 5 primary forms of self-sabotage that prevent most people from achieving their potential. He called them the 5 enemies of success: indefiniteness of purpose, the failure to decide specifically what you want and buy when you want it; indefiniteness of plans, the failure to create concrete, written plans for achieving your purpose; unwillingness to go the extra mile, the tendency to do no more than the minimum required; lack of organized thinking, the habit of reaching conclusions without accurate data; fear of criticism, the paralysis that comes from worrying about what others might think. These 5 enemies operate beneath conscious awareness for most people. They disguise themselves as reasonable caution, practical thinking, or proper work-life balance. In reality, they're sophisticated forms of self-sabotage that preserve comfortable mediocrity while preventing uncomfortable growth. Consider how many potentially world-changing ideas have died because their originators feared criticism. How many businesses have failed because their founders weren't willing to go the extra mile during difficult periods? How many personal transformations have stalled because the individual never clarified their specific purpose or created concrete plans for its achievement? Hill discovered that successful individuals weren't immune to these 5 enemies. They simply developed specific antidotes to each. They combated indefiniteness of purpose by writing specific goals with deadlines. They overcame indefiniteness of plans by creating detailed action steps, reviewed daily. They defeated unwillingness to go the extra mile by committing to deliver more value than they were paid for. They conquered disorganized thinking by seeking accurate information before forming opinions. They transcended fear of criticism by focusing on their definite purpose rather than others' opinions. Ask yourself, which of these 5 enemies has most frequently derailed your efforts? What specific antidotes can you implement starting today? Your honest assessment will reveal which forms of self-sabotage require your immediate attention. Before success comes in any man's life, he is sure to meet with much temporary defeat, and, perhaps, some failure. When defeat overtakes a man, the easiest and most logical thing to do is to quit. That is exactly what the majority of men do. This Hill observation highlights perhaps the most insidious form of self-sabotage: the abandonment of worthy goals at the first experience of failure. Hill conducted a fascinating study of more than 25,000 people classified as failures. He discovered that 99% shared one common trait: the habit of quitting when faced with temporary defeat. By contrast, the most successful individuals he studied had all experienced multiple severe setbacks but persisted through what he called the persistence barrier, the psychological threshold where most people abandon their efforts. This persistence barrier exists in every worthwhile pursuit. In business, it's the period between launch and profitability, where expenses exceed revenue and outside observers label the venture a failure. In skill development, it's the plateau where hours of practice yield no visible improvement and motivation wanes. In relationships, it's the difficult conversations and adjustments needed to transform conflict into deeper connection. In health transformation, it's the weeks or months of consistent effort before visible results appear. On the far side of this persistence barrier lies the breakthrough that appears magical to outside observers but is simply the natural result of continuing when others would quit. Howard Schultz's initial concept for Starbucks was rejected by investors 217 times before he secured funding. Walt Disney was fired from a newspaper for lacking imagination. Oprah Winfrey was told she was too emotional and not cut out for television. Stephen King's first novel was rejected 30 times. Leading him to throw the manuscript in the trash, his wife retrieved it and convinced him to continue submitting it. What separated these individuals from countless others with similar talents and ideas? Simply their willingness to persist through the barrier that stops most people. Ask yourself, how many times am I willing to fail before succeeding? At what point would I abandon my most important goal? What evidence would convince me my efforts are futile rather than merely incomplete?